if sentiment and participation were two factors which dominated 2020, what are the factors which really would be the driving factors for 2021? Ravi, fantastic to have you on ET Now. Before I start our today's conversation, let me extend season's greetings and best wishes for a wonderful year ahead.
Thank you, Nikunj. Wishing you and your viewers a very hopeful and prosperous 2021, and hope it turns out to be even better than 2020 in terms of market. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Ravi, what is the right way of looking at markets? Because for 2020, the Nifty return for the entire year was about 10%. But if I count what markets did from the March low of 7,500 to 15,000, it's been a return of almost 100%.
Yeah, so first of all, what a year it's been. It's been packed with lessons that are not easy to forget. We are lucky to be still living and thriving in these unfortunate times. So touch wood, but God willing, hopefully things will turn out better. But coming back to your question, see, the way to look at it is this way. I mean, around March time, I had tweeted that this is the point of maximum pessimism. Now, not many people understand the importance of that. If that was the point of maximum pessimism, then essentially what it means is that from that point on, a new bull market is going to be born. See, in March, we had like crazy type of volatility, and our VIX levels had reached as high as what it had been in the global financial crisis of 2008. So what essentially transpired in the month of March was a fast forward accelerated version of the global financial crisis in a month's time. So 40% drop, and that on back of already going on bear market in small and mid cap since 2018. So we were anyway losing hope, whether it was about government, whether it was about businesses, and there were too many issues to have a positive outlook. And on top of that, then you get hit by COVID, which literally brings everything to a screeching halt. So that really broke the camel's back, and everybody just gave up hope. And what we saw in the market, literally, and I mean, if you had lived through 2008, you think you have the kind of experience you need to sustain this. But again, market time and again surprises you and tests you. So 2020 March was one such testing period, but it was clearly the point of maximum pessimism. Now, if that was the point of maximum pessimism, then a new bull market was about to be born. So a lot of people failed to see was that what action governments of the world and the central banks of the world will take. So whether it's been a terrorist attack, or whether it's been a global financial crisis, or whether it's been a health pandemic, the response of the central banks around the world has been to provide a stimulus to the market, cut interest rate, provide liquidity to the market. So if that is going to be our standard response, then whether or not we overcome pandemic, we will surely overcome the asset price deflation. And that's exactly what has happened. So now today, when we are up almost double from the bottom, it does not take a genius to tell you that, yeah, there will be volatility up ahead, there is likely to be a correction. But I think we have to look beyond the near-term volatility or the near-term downtick or correction, consolidation, whatever could happen. And you have to start looking whether this liquidity that has been provided or the steps that have been taken, will that lead to a more sustainable bull market or not? And that is the question that one should be looking to answer all the time.
Ravi, so let's address the central theme, which is liquidity. Looks like it's a one-trick pony, because the reason why markets have gone higher in the month of October, November and December is because of this brute force of liquidity. Now, there's no scientific matrix which will tell you that what will happen to liquidity. But if liquidity is one of the factors why markets are going higher, can one safely assume that markets will continue to go higher because there is abundant liquidity?
So I will provide you with a couple of data points, and then you can I'll ask you what your conclusion would be. So 2001, September 2001, we had a terrorist attack, and Fed opened the floodgates, and The money supply growth went from 6.2% to 10.3%. But the Fed's balance sheet size did not change much. And the fiscal deficit ballooned to 3.8%. So essentially, a fiscal monetary policy and fiscal policy support was given to the markets. Now, that led to a 7-year of bull market, and the global GDP global market cap went from $23 trillion to $60 trillion in a span of 7 years. So now that was in 2001. Now in 2009, when post the 2008 crisis, again, Fed's balance sheet ballooned by 2.5x, and the money supply growth increased from 6.2% to 9.4%, and fiscal deficit ballooned to 7.9%. Now, if that was the case, what was the outcome in the market? The market cap went from $32 trillion. I'm talking about the world market cap. Went from $32 trillion to $90 trillion market cap. This is pre-COVID peak. Basically, in 10 years' time, almost triple market cap. Now, come today, I mean, in March 2020, Fed has expanded its balance sheet by 2x. Money supply has been increased by 3x, and the fiscal deficit has been allowed to balloon. And absolute money pumped in is over $9 trillion worldwide of the various major major developed countries. Now, the market cap of the world bottomed at $65 trillion, and in 9 months, we are at about $103 trillion. You tell me, if 2001 and 2009 are a guidebook in a way. See, markets and history will never be exactly the same. So it has to, but if there is any direct correlation of the markets with any one particular variable, it is liquidity. GDP growth and everything else is a much lesser predictor of where the market is headed than it is the liquidity. So now, if I tell you that what has happened in 2020 is way more than 2001 and 2009, what would you expect the market to do?
I argue and say the difference between 2008 and right now is that from 2008 and in subsequent years, interest rates, they start coming down. It was a glide path which was visible. But currently interest rates have already bottomed out. They are negative in some countries. So if interest rates have to go, they will only go higher. Isn't that a big risk to the template of low interest rates?
Nikunj, slightly disagree over there. Usually markets don't start rallying when the rate cuts are being made. In fact, rate cuts imply that central bankers are worried and things are going to get worse. It's usually they end up, overextending themselves on the downside, which leads to the rebound in the market. So it's usually when the interest rates bottom out is when the equity markets start performing. So even in our case, if you see, when the steps were being taken by the government and the central bank, when the liquidity was being provided and interest rates were being cut, markets kept falling relentlessly. But once that all the leveraged players are out of the system and the patient capital comes back, they evaluate that every crisis has been an accelerant, so to say. So even COVID is no different. The response of the government is to provide liquidity and fiscal push, and that is going to lead to a revival in the market and hopefully in the economy as well. And the heartening part for us is that this rally is not without accompanying improvement in GDP or earnings cycle. Of course, market is at this point of time running ahead of it, but I don't think it is running so way ahead of it that we can have a big crash.
Great point, Ravi. Okay, Ravi, let's talk about a sector which you track with the magnifying glass, the pharma space. Now, 2020 has been an outsized year for pharma in terms of gains. Divi's was up 100%, Dr. Reddy closed at an all-time high, Aurobindo Pharma nearing 1,000 rupees. How does one go about choosing pharma space now? Because within the pharma space now, there are so many factors which are at play. Reboot of the US generic market, local demand coming back because of healthcare spend, emerging markets also are looking better. How's the big picture for pharma looking after the recent run-up?
No, so I think 2020 was the year when the world recognized the importance of Indian pharma, Indian generic players. So just rewind a couple of years, and there were all kinds of negativity around. US FDA was issuing warning letters, and there were books being written about how our companies are manipulating everything. So, but you cannot overlook the fact that now every fourth pill consumed in US is made in India. So that kind of a thing cannot happen without necessary quality standards. So the pharma story is way beyond COVID. COVID is definitely has accelerated the opportunity, accentuated the opportunity, even opened up new doors. Like vaccines was not something that we looked upon as an opportunity when evaluating pharma companies. But now there are lots of vaccine plays available. There are lots of API plays available thanks to the PLI scheme of government. And of course, there are the US generics plays that are available. And that story is panning out because the generic market, so to say, had reached some better equilibrium in terms of pricing. So, I mean, I remain very bullish on the pharma space from the next 3-4 year point
Ravi,
of view.
let's try and get slightly more specific. I respect your compliance that it does not permit you to speak on individual stocks, but let's understand how the pharma space is evolving. You've got Biocon moving towards biosimilar. You've got Granules and Laurus complete play on API. If I migrate, you got Cadila, which has got re-rated because of vaccine. Ipca got a huge punch because of HCQ, which in a sense was more like a sugar rush that did not last. Where are you focusing on within the pharma space? Biosimilars, specialty, API?
No, so we continue to like stories that are focused on US market. US is the largest market. The Indian players need to upgrade themselves from being pure play commoditized generics focusing on oral solids to a more specialized role. More specialized being it would be either biosimilars or inhalers or other small niche specialty molecules, so complex molecules. So those are the opportunities to focus on, and of course you have to evaluate every player's pipeline, how they are positioned, who's going to take advantage of which opportunity. I would say that opportunity is still very large, and there is still a large runway available for Indian players to upgrade themselves. Since last 5 years, they have been investing for the future, and all those investments are going to bear fruits in the next 3 years. So I think the future looks very bright for companies focused on US markets. Indian domestic market plays are also decent, but at some point last year, those opportunities had been fully priced, so to say. So at some point they will also become attractive again, but relative delta was definitely more on the US focused plays. Now we also have some presence on the API side of the market, and I believe this focus of Indian government to reduce dependence on China and to encourage champion players out of every sector is going to lead to a big boom on the API side. It is already happening. Clients on their own are coming and wanting a China plus one strategy, and they are moving a little bit away from China. So all that will reflect. I think the numbers. So there was some element of one time because of bunching up of COVID orders, whether it was HCQS or azithromycin or those type of thing. But the mindset shift is definitely permanent. The increase might be gradual, but I think India's prominence in the world, Indian pharma sector's prominence in the world is only going to increase.
So Ravi, you mentioned last time that pharma is a dominant part of your portfolio and you were running a significant overweight from what the Nifty benchmark is. In fact, Nifty does not have a big representation in pharma, but you were running a significant overweight. Are you planning to stick to that?
Yeah, so definitely we continue to stick with pharma. There is no reason for us to, anticipate or preempt what lies ahead. At this point of time, things are panning out way better than what we had envisaged. So we are going to let it run. So one of the portfolio companies that we have had has ended up achieving our internal target of FY23 and FY21 itself. So I mean, I don't know where to go, and I mean, it's just puts things in perspective that we have no ability to predict what's going to happen. What we are trying to play here is probabilities and cycles. The cycle still looks favorable, the probability still looks good. So we are going to stick with it.
Ravi, in last 3-4 months, we've seen the other side of the market coming back. Steel, cement, PSU banks. Is this rotation which is at play, or this comeback in some of the industrials and cyclicals can just go beyond this deep swell what we currently are witnessing?
No, I think I was earlier of the opinion that it would be a mean reversion, but I have changed my view. I think there is the economic revival has been sooner and also much better than expected. I think it's almost a V-shaped recovery. That's what everybody is leaning towards. The kind of surprise that we are seeing, whether it is on the NPA cycle or whether it is on the GDP growth or the various demand factors that we see, it's obviously a big surprise. So no, I think it has credibility, it has legs. We will wax and wane between which theme does better, whether it's the COVID theme that does better or whether it's the recovery theme that does better. But I think both the themes have credibility at this point of time.
Ravi, your new idea is to invest into home improvement companies, tile, paints, pipes. What's fueling your optimism? Because real estate is still in a downturn. Yes, we can talk about selective pockets where green shoots are there, but we are not staring at a linear demand in real estate.
No, so basic thesis is it's a multiple things that are driving us towards home improvement. But the big thing is there is a revival in real estate. So there has been a huge consolidation in the real estate sector. The supply supply overhang has been reducing. The absorption has increased in the last 6 months. The kind of registration numbers that are popping out thanks to the various incentives provided by central as well as state government is definitely credit-worthy. So there are many ways to play this thing. You can go ahead and buy a developer, or you can go ahead and buy a home story improvement or building materials, as you would say. So the industry structures are better on the home improvement side. The valuations are also available. There is also a tailwind of consolidation in the sector. Even in, for example, pipes is one theme. There is a consolidation where some of the people, some of the players have been rooted out thanks to the crisis, and there is a higher market share and growth amongst the top 2-3 players. So if you can identify a player within home improvement, the industry structure is better, and the real estate revival tailwind is also there. And I think some of these market caps are really cheap from an absolute point of view.
So Ravi, are we in for a bull market like we saw between 2013 and 2017 for mid and small cap stocks, or it's too late now to assume that we could be in for that kind of a market?
So in fact, I feel it is better than 2013 to 17. I think it is more like 2003 to 7. The point from where the rally has started was point of maximum pessimism, and the kind of policies and reforms the government has put in place are going to provide a better glide path over the next few years for the growth overall. Now already people are talking about a 10% kind of a growth in FY22 in GDP. I don't know. I mean, today you have to take a call if that kind of a growth can come. Of course, the growth is coming from a lower base, but still it will be a 10% GDP growth print or a double-digit growth print. If that is the case, then you really need to think how you are going to be positioning yourself. I think, again, I'm at the cost of repeating myself, I would say the bigger risk is not being invested in the equities than it is for whatever the correction consolidation is in store in the next few months. So I would say this the economic cycle bottoming out is more akin to 2003 to 7 cycle than it is to 13 to 17 cycle.
So Ravi, how much of the market do you think has reached a level beyond which PE expansion is unlikely to happen even if earnings come? And how much of the market do you think will see both earning expansion and PE expansion?
See, Nikunj, if one were to speak statistically, everybody is very well intentioned and in saying or that one should be cautious. If one provides a cautious guidance, you're well-meaning and you're intelligent. But if you provide an unabashed bullish view, then you are looked upon as somebody who is marketing themselves. Unfortunately, that is the fact. But see, statistics can be very, very misleading. The tail events are usually that define the investing career. That's what, and I would recommend this book called Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. That's what he has said in that. So more likely than not, it is these tail events that define your investing career. And but most of the time, people leave these tail events out of their investing journey. So if I were to tell you that there has been an unprecedented liquidity being pumped in, and every time in the past, whenever such kind of a thing has happened, we have had a 7-8 year bull market and 3-4x market cap. I mean, I would expect the similar kind of a result this time around also, though I will always keep monitoring whether that is happening or no. But if that is the kind of wealth creation that has happened, this $103 trillion that world market cap has reached, who is to say it cannot reach 150 trillion or 200 trillion? I am not suggesting that it is going to happen, but if that is to happen, then I mean, it's better off that you are focused on investing, finding opportunities, rather than trying to be over smart and trying to time the next correction.
Ravi, old timers always say there are two classic signs which when you see them on the street, it's time to hunker down or time to just lock your gains. Number one, activity in the IPO market, and number two, the retail participation, whether it's Robinhood traders or local traders in India looking at demat accounts and other things. Why are you not worried about them? Because these are classic signs which some of the best folks have used in the past to understand what the market level and participation is.
Yeah, so definitely, see, when a trend begins, when something goes from 10 to 100, which is basically 10x, at every point you could have said, when it was 70, you could have said there is euphoria, 80, you could have said there is euphoria, 90, you could have said euphoria, but it is at 100 is where the market peaked, just for an example. So if the new trend is that people are going to take money out of mutual fund and do trading on their own, good luck to them. I don't believe that this is a secular trend. It is just, and people, those who are doing it on their own, I don't think they are investing. The kind of holding period that they had in mutual fund will not be replicated when they do it on their own. They will turn out to be traders. So my advice to them is, stick around with the mutual funds, stick around with your SIPs, stick around with equity markets. Don't get into this fancy new shiny thing of investing on your own. So having said that, is it a sign of a bubble? I don't think it is a sign of a bubble. We are still, how many demat accounts do we have as compared to, let's say, insurance policy, as compared to bank accounts, as compared to, so what is the percentage of the domestic money of the domestic net worth? Is it invested into equities? I don't think those numbers are in any way alarming. So just the number of account openings or demat account opening or the rate change in rate of that is not reason enough to be worried about euphoria.
Ravi, the world is moving towards digitization. You have a play in that space. What is the best way to participate in the so-called digital adaptability? Because in India, you've got sliver of companies which are a pure digital play, and then you've got IT services on the other side, which in a sense are service provider. How do you propose one should align their portfolio to really maximize on this entire digital uptick which is happening in the world?
See, this is a mega trend. The optimism is high in US, but we public market investors of Indian market have been untouched, so to say. There are few and far stocks, like there are less than 10 stocks probably, and they are also playing in a very, very niche vertical of a particular segment. So over the next 3 years, one thing is for sure, all your Flipkarts of the world to all these disruptive companies are going to come to the market, and we are going to see a huge increase in this bubble is going to get bigger. I mean, and most of it is going to be by new players coming to the public market. So if that is the case, then I would say you can manage your risk by the kind of allocation that you do, but you cannot not have exposure to the digitization thing. See, what COVID did, one thing is it accelerated the trend even further. Now, everybody, whether it's an old person or a young person, if it is a young person, then they do Zoom classes online. If it is an old person, now they have gotten used to, doing their shopping online. But bulk of the activity has gone online, and people have, these are habits that have changed permanently. So no doubt about it, once the COVID is out of the way, people will come back to socializing and doing things offline as well. But some of the things, some of the option has become much more viable. And that what was supposed to happen over a 10-year period has suddenly started, got crunched and is probably going to happen in next 2-3 years. In that sense, this opportunity is similar to what happened with Y2K, where we had a deadline to meet and everybody had to write a line of code replacing the 00 with 4-digit year number. So essentially, in coming back to digitization theme, I think it is a mega trend. The trend just got accelerated. There will be new players coming to the market. There are new business models emerging right as we speak. So I would not be overly concerned about bubble at this point of time. If you are really worried about bubble, the bigger bubble is in bond markets, and bigger bubble is in private equity market, not public markets at this point of time.
Ravi, let's talk about banks. They've also made a comeback. While you got HDFC Bank and Kotak Mahindra Bank, which have reclaimed their previous highs, other banks have also managed to raise capital, whether it's the Canara Bank or PNB or even IDBI Bank. But if I look at the market positioning, a lot of banks, and especially the mid-tier banks, are nowhere close to their pre-COVID levels, while HDFC and Kotak have re-emerged as clear outperformers. Why is that happening?
So clearly, market has distinguished the winners and the losers, or so to say. See, PSU banks still have a lot of repair work to do. On the other hand, the private banks, they are looking for growth capital, or they already have raised the growth capital. In fact, RBI forced all of them to raise funds, and everybody ended up over capitalizing themselves. Now that is going to hold in good stead if the economy was actually to improve. Then there will be far less supply of paper from the private banks into the market. On the PSU side, on the other hand, there will still be a lot of supply. We still have no idea how much the problems could be. Problems are going to be lesser than what was anticipated in March, but there will still be some amount of asset deterioration that can still happen on the PSU front. So overall, I remain no way am I going to invest in PSU banks. Private banks still remain an investor, but in the overall scheme of things, it's less of a weightage as compared to some of the other sectors.
All right, Ravi, wonderful to have you on ET Now. Best wishes for 2021 and certainly hope to see much more of you going.